Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Doctor Who Big Finish review. 10 years ago, Big Finish did this trilogy called the 1963 trilogy, where it was three stories set in the year of 1963.
Hmm.
And they are the Fanfare for the Common Men,
Written by Eddie Robson,
the Space Race,
written by Jonathan Morris,
and the Assassination Games.
written by John Dorney. Three
So,
writers who are still around at Big Finish, actually.
yeah, sort of three main staples, I would say. I mean, Jonathan Morris is definitely going to have a good year in 2024.
Mm. Dorney's having a good year every year, it seems.
Yeah, yeah, and then Eddie Robson's done a fair few this year. He did
Yeah,
the Third Doctor this year, which was great, in
sort of
Intelligence for War.
comes and goes, doesn't he?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but yeah, certainly has some strong ones when he does hop along to
Mm.
do a Big Finish. So yeah, this was released, of course, during 2013 as part of the 50th anniversary celebrations.
I guess this is part two for us because we did light at the end the 50th celebration.
That's like the main special. Now we're doing one of the other little things they did for it, aren't we? Yeah.
Yeah,
And this is a very different way of doing a celebration because it is, as you said, looking back at the year 1963. And instead of looking back at Doctor Who's past and taking elements from that, it looks at the year 1963 and says, what was the culture around Doctor Who at the time? What was going on in the zeitgeist? And so you have pop music, you have like a Beatles, but not the Beatles
hmm
style story with Fanfare for the Common Men. You of course have the space race in the space race, and the competition between Russia and America to reach the moon first, and how that very much was blazing away during the 1960s. And not just victories of war, but victories of propaganda.
yeah.
How there was espionage there, but also um, a lot of it was about appearance, really, and this projection of strength from both sides. And then finally, with the Assassination Games, you have sort of a different kind of espionage looking into British
Political
politics
thriller.
at the time. Yeah. And sort of about a time when the general public were losing faith in politicians, no
Mm.
longer quite seeing them as for the people as they may once have appeared. And, all the scandals that start coming out then, this idea of a man having an affair, shocking, end of the career. But now, sadly, that's run of the mill, really. I mean, what politician hasn't had an affair and had to apologize for it and then just gone on as usual?
Yeah.
It's a crazy time, but it's sort of like it's looking back at that shift in politics into what we now know it as today. And yeah, I mean, three very different aspects of 1960s life there that while none of them ever really came up too much within Doctor Who itself, particularly early on at least, but nevertheless, that influence would have been felt upon the production team at the time. This is part of the lives they were leading. And yeah, I think that's a fascinating concept for a series of anniversary specials of sorts. It almost feels like something that should be done on TV
Yeah.
at some point, looking back at the 1960s through that lens a bit more of not just a Doctor Who lens, but a what was going on around Doctor Who at that time, what shaped the world that shaped Doctor Who. And it's wonderful to have a trilogy here that does that. And it all kicks off with Fanfare for the Common Men. And the
Mm.
Common Men, for those of you who aren't too big on your Big Finish, may still sound familiar to you because John Smith and the Common Men are mentioned in the very first episode, An Unearthly
Yeah.
Child.
It's a nice sort of tie-in, isn't it?
A nice little callback there, and does all come into it. But basically, it's set in this alternative timeline, it appears, because the Doctor has taken Nissa to meet the Beatles, experience Beatlemania, and who steps off the plane? It's not the ones you were expecting. It is instead the common men. So a different set of cheeky chaps from Liverpool. And so the Doctor has to investigate why history has changed, for what purpose, and where uh, that's going to lead to. It's quite a quick story, I would say.
Yeah, it's very quick. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot. It's fun fluff, but it utilizes time incredibly well. I think how it
Mm.
sort of separates the Doctor and Nissa, and they both have their own sort of agency and mission to do what they have to do. It almost feels very sort of Stephen Moffat-y with how it uses time, and yeah, it's beautiful, really, because it's sort of mapping the history of the Beatles, but with the common men. So if you're a fan of the Beatles, you'll probably get a big kick out of this. And I think that it's a story that goes all out. It's got original
Mm.
songs there, and they are naturally earworms. They get stuck in your head. Like
Yeah,
you
they are
get
one. The
why,
music suite on this alone is worth listening to
yeah,
without like the story, because like not just for the songs, but the incidental music as well is very much riffing off, the Beatles style of tunes without riffing off any direct tunes.
yeah,
And like there's a wonderful little piece where the Doctor leaves in the TARDIS at
mm,
one point during the story, and yeah, it hits that same beat in your brain as the Middle Eight does from
mm.
particularly the War Masters.
It feels very new series at that moment as well, and you're like you get why Davison sort of classed as the modern classic
Mm,
Doctor.
yeah. I mean, here he is with a single companion as well
Mm,
in Nissa, played by Sarah Sutton. So that is sort of, again, a more new series style approach, isn't it? Of the younger Doctor and then single female companion.
yeah,
Uh, and so, that again plays into it. And I think it does work very well having them split up for this story,
yeah,
getting those two different strands in different periods of history as well. So it's like you're not necessarily doubling up on the amount of characters because you're following the common men
yeah,
at different points in their lives. Which, yeah, I mean, it's funny that it is called 1963. Yeah, it spends very little time in 1963, but
yeah,
it's nevertheless about something that I suppose is well remembered in 1963, and it's like one of the peaks of Beatlemania, isn't
mm.
that?
Yeah. I think my only negative I have for the story, I think
Mm.
it's sort of part three when we get more introduced into the alien side of it.
Yeah, I think particularly part four where that goes, I sort of like was enjoying it more when it was just vibing with the characters in some
Yeah,
way and having that mystery. I think once the mystery is revealed, it loses a certain something
yeah,
and just becomes good fun, but yeah, ultimately nothing too incredible. I mean, we both own this story twice in a way.
hmm,
You because you have it on vinyl as well as
yes,
CD,
yeah.
which is absolutely
It's the
perfect. Like
story
this
for
is,
vinyl. It is made
uh,
for it.
I do want to pick up the vinyl. I have it twice because the first time it turned up, it was absolutely crushed, and I had to ask for a replacement.
And the CD's great because it's done like a vinyl, so I think it's one
Yeah,
where it naturally pays to have the physical copy.
It was at a time when they really went all out with the presentation of their physical media, because not just the discs looking like vinyl discs, but also the booklet inside looking like a LP booklet in
Mm,
the middle. I think that is wonderfully produced, and it's nice to see that effort taken further. I mean, sadly, it is now only available as a download, but
yeah,
I'm sure if you really wanted to, you could either track down the CD or the vinyl, or both, if you
yeah.
so
Do it,
choose.
do it, do it, do it, because it's
They,
worth it.
I'm sure they are out there. And yeah, this is one of those ones where you will get something a little extra out of holding it in your hand, flicking through it, and yeah, seeing those discs. It's something special. The physical presentation of this release, and I think does boost it somewhat. But for me, it's a 7 out of 10.
I'd go 9. I had a great
Oh
time with
wow,
it.
really?
Love it.
Oh.
Love it. It's I think it's sort of an under the radar Davo story.
Hmm. It's all like before the big Davo Renaissance, isn't it?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
it'll get overlooked a bit, but nevertheless, it is a solid one from him. And then we have the space race, which for you only listened to for the first time very recently. In fact, that's part of the reason we
Yeah.
ended up recording this,
Yeah. Yeah.
because you listened to it. The Assassination Games
It was on
came
BBC
out on
Sounds.
BBC Sounds, and we just thought, why not just do the whole trilogy
It's the 60th
together?
year.
Yeah,
Let's do it.
let's go for it. And so I've been sticking them on, having a great time with it. Uh, what did you make of the space race as a first listen for you?
It's so bat crazy and so
Mm.
wonderfully bleak and twisted, and it's so wonderfully. It feels very sort of Pertwee.
Mm.
You can
Very
imagine sort of,
ambassadors.
yeah, you can imagine Pertwee going off to the moon, and I love how conscious Jonathan Morris is with time and how it all leads to part three's cliffhanger. Which, if you know
Mm.
your history and what event that is, it's so blooming brilliant.
Yeah, that's a strong cliffhanger. And it's set like across November 1963. And so, yeah, the way it all plays out as it ticks across that month, I think is brilliant. And like you say, it is absurd in some ways, but it takes itself very
Seriously.
serious. Yeah. And I think that adds to the horror of it. And it definitely does have a comment on humanity and, that whole concept of the space race of humanity going out into the stars for the first time. It's like, what vices and baggage are we taking out there with us? What evils are man going to be unleashing on the stars? It's not exactly a unique concept.
Mhm.
It's been done in sci-fi before. It's been done in Doctor Who before.
And how it uses
But
Leica
mm,
as
yeah,
well. It makes you go, make sure you look after your pets.
yeah,
Otherwise, they'll turn and there'll be an uprising, as it were.
yeah.
But I think, oh, what was it? Jonathan Morris. Basically, he wanted to go for the Russian side because there's really nothing about that side. So
Yeah, it's
there's
always.
more creative liberties you can take by doing the Russian perspective rather than the American.
I love how that's handled within the story as well, because it's not, actors throwing on a silly Russian accent for the whole thing. It's similar to Cold War in that they're basically just using their natural British accents, all
Yeah,
these actors. But then there's one point during the story where one of the characters radios over to America, and that same character who we've been hearing using the British accent this whole time is suddenly using a Russian one, but like over the radio. So you're sort of like led to believe, it's beyond the TARDIS translation circuit's reach. And just the way that's presented, I think works very well as like a reminder of these are Russians without having to have
yeah,
awkward fake Russian accents throughout the whole thing. I think, yeah, I love that as a stylistic choice within this story. I think that tickled me a bit. And yeah, like you say, the going at this from the Russian perspective, uh, I think was a nice change of pace, but what you'd come to expect from a story called The Space Race, because
yeah.
so much of it is, American central. Uh, and yeah, this provides something quite interesting. And also an exploration of perhaps why we know less about that side of
Hmm.
things. Because as I said earlier, a lot of this story is about, propaganda victories, as much as, a victory for in a war. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one. I think it is my favorite of the three. I'd give it
Okay,
an 8.5 out of 10.
I'll give it an 8.
And now we come to the Assassination Games. Another one which is a first listen for you in a way because you never quite made it through part one before, did you?
No, it's one I've sort of struggled with, and I know why.
Why is that?
It's very Doctor and Ace light. It's very much the countermeasures team leading, sort of dealing with this sort of volatile geopolitical climate, really.
Yeah. I mean, that's certainly how it starts off. I think as it goes on, it does transition more to the Seventh Doctor and Ace.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, for me, who hadn't listened to any countermeasure at this point, as this being my first taste of them on audio after enjoying them so much, as I'm sure many of us did, in Remembrance of the Daleks, you know, I was just happy to have them around, really.
See,
And I
I
think it
thought
worked quite
this
well.
was the pilot for Countermeasures, but Countermeasures came out, I think, 2012.
This is
Um,
like almost a later pilot, if that makes
yeah,
sense, because it
yeah,
is set between series one and Remembrance of the Daleks. So yeah, it does come before all that and does set up some aspects of that. But um, nevertheless, it is a Doctor Who story with the Seventh Doctor and Ace becoming more central to it as the story goes on.
yeah.
But
It's very sort of it's a slow burner. It's
hmm,
very dialogue heavy.
yeah, I think there's a lot of names and characters to keep track of. Some
Yeah.
of them like switching, some of them like the same character
Hmm.
who then switch. Other times you have characters sort of introduced and then don't last too long. And I think it can be a bit confusing at times, all that. And it can be difficult to do political thrillers on audio because there's so much to keep track of on top of keeping track of an audio because
Yeah.
audios just do require you to pay a bit more attention than TV does. And here that is taken to a further extreme through the political machinations that are at play. And so, did it pay off persevering through this story?
For me, it's the weakest of the trilogy.
Uh, I prefer it over Fanfare, funnily enough,
Oh, right, okay.
but I think it does have its weaker moments than Fanfare.
Yeah.
It's got the stronger strengths, but the weaker weaknesses,
Hmm.
higher highs and lower lows.
I think Fanfare was just fun, whereas this
Mm.
was
This is much heavier.
dense. It's
Yeah,
dense.
yeah. I think it is maybe one that requires multiple listens to really get the most out of it. But yeah, I'm not too sure I love it enough to persevere for those multiple listens when there's so much else out
Yeah.
there to go through. I mean, I'm sure I'll come back to it again at some point, but by then, I'll have forgotten most of what I had on the this previous listen.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it is a joy having the countermeasures team back. I do love them
It
quite a bit.
utilizes them great and puts them in their own sort of own little scenarios and dangers.
I mean, it's interesting having a young Ace here as well,
Yeah.
because this is quite explicitly stated as being set early on. It does feel like the timeline is quite crunched here
Hmm.
because this is said to be November. Clearly, a little bit of time has passed since Remembrance, which is also meant to be in November, presumably,
Yeah.
despite it being light still at 5:15, wherever it was when that announcement is made. But yeah, it's all fiction at the end of the day. It doesn't have to totally add up. But yeah, it's just something that maybe best not to try and rationalize too deeply in your head. Yeah, on the whole, I did enjoy this one. I would give it a 7.5 out of 10.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Ah, there we go. So yeah, that is the 1963 trilogy.
Hmm.
Nice little throwback to do. I'm glad we've been revisiting these things.
Yeah, it's nice to do a little throwback.
Yeah. And I mean, come March next year, we'll have a huge video out there for you all to enjoy as we
Yes.
rank the entire monthly range. This is like a little preview of what's to come there, I suppose. And
Yeah.
it's all like a proof of us saying we are still doing that.
It's
Look,
still happening.
we're listening. We're making our way through what we can. But yeah, I mean, until then, there's lots of other videos coming out as
Plenty
well.
Big Finish.
Yeah, loads of Big Finish, new and old. We're doing more throwbacks, and we'll be reviewing the latest sets as well. We got Seventh Doctor: The Last Day coming out this
Yeah,
month.
yeah. That's exciting.
Yeah, so plenty more to come. If you've listened to the 1963 trilogy, we'd love to hear what you think about it. Please feel free to leave a comment below. If you've not listened to it, which one intrigues you the most? I'd be curious.
Or listen to Assassination Games. It's free on BBC Sounds.
Yeah, there you go. If that's the one that intrigues you the most, you don't even have to fork over any money for it. It's
Yeah.
right there at your disposal. So, yeah, what a time to be a Doctor Who fan, having all of that available on iPlayer with Classic Who, and now some Big Finish making its way onto BBC Sounds.
It's great.
Hmm. Uh, I hope that you're all enjoying this great time to be a Doctor Who fan. Please leave a like if you enjoyed this video, subscribe to the channel for more, and we'll see you next time.
Bye bye.